Nice. That was easy.
Yeah. On a Thursday, too.
I know. It's impressive. Yeah. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah, we hear you. Yeah.
So I hate to say it, but like the building was orange yesterday. So you were off. Did you wear this one yesterday?
No.
Okay,
What
so
building?
the lights on the building. You
Oh,
need to
I'm not
coordinate.
coordinating
Yeah, you
properly.
need to
I'm sorry.
coordinate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like this one.
It's very
It's actually it's called Carnelian red. So,
nice. Ooh.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But however, having said that,
So you're coordinating.
I'm coordinated. Yeah. Should we get started? I think we'll get started. We have a fairly busy agenda today, so let's get going. This is the HTTP working group. If you're not here for the HTTP working group, you should probably be somewhere else. Next slide. So this is the note. Well, could someone in the back possibly close the door? That might be helpful. Thank you. This is the note. Well, if you're not familiar with this, these are the terms and conditions under which we participate in the IETF regarding things like intellectual property and privacy, the fact that this session is being recorded, and also your behavior. So there's a code of conduct and harassment procedures. If you're not familiar with these, please do become so. You can use your favorite internet search engine to search for IETF Note Well, and that will take you to these, we hope, if it's working well. So please be aware we do take these seriously, especially regarding the code of conduct, for example. And intellectual property. That's important too. We have scribes. Thank you very much, Josh and Marius. That's very kind. So we can get straight to the agenda. We did a little agenda modification before. Our AD has requested some feedback on a draft, which we'll get to in a minute. Then we're going to discuss 3 active drafts, and we have one other topic. Any bashing of the agenda? Sounds good? Sounds good. Okay, let's move on. So first off, I'll take the screen share thing. It's not shared. Okay. I want to share screen. Allow to share window. Share this window. Okay. So a brief history, and hopefully we won't spend too much time on this. The this draft had a request for a review by the HTTP Directorate, and we did a review, and there were some concerns raised about it. It's in a nutshell, it's, as I understand it, a configuration format. It's a Yang grouping for describing HTTP clients and servers so that you can talk about their configuration. And the concern, very briefly, was that it specifies very detailed information about HTTP versions supported in clients and servers. So you can say, I want the client to use this version of HTTP. And from discussions, it seems like that's a potential optimization mechanism to say we want to skip, the protocol version negotiation and embed that in configuration. And so from an HTTP architectural standpoint, the concern was that that's circumventing the protocol negotiation mechanisms and limiting the evolution of HTTP potentially. It's not considered good practice from our standpoint. And so this has been, the area director put a discuss in the document, and it's been on there for quite some time, and there hasn't been a lot of progress made. So we thought it would be good to ask the HTTP community as a whole, rather than just the directorate and that thin slice of review. What do folks think about this? Have people read it? We put it out to the list the other day. Does anybody want to make any comments here so we can get that on the record, as it were? Unfortunately, there's a clash, and the authors couldn't be here, but it will be on the recording and in the minutes so that they can get a sense of what folks here think. So I'll just open the queue if anybody wants to have a word. Daryl, you're up.
Daryl Miller. I did read the draft and looked at the options that are there. I think the main concern I have is this provides config options for explicitly selecting 1, 1, 2, 3. In reviewing kind of popular client libraries, HTTP client libraries, I looked at the .NET one, the Go, OKHTTP and Java. They don't have these kind of configuration options that are exposed to developers. It's more like they'll have policies where it says, pick this one or lower, pick this one or higher, and some of them just don't have any configuration options at all. They do the negotiation completely themselves, and they have fallback mechanisms. So I'm concerned that if somebody tries to go implement apps that then implement this policy, it's going to be fairly difficult. And if this is for the purposes of optimization by certain mechanisms, then maybe we can capture those in the config. Like if there are ways that you can optimize it, let's capture those as preferences in the config rather than trying to explicitly choose versions, because it gets complicated when you start looking at versions and TLS and blah, blah, blah. So.
Thanks.
David Skenazy, HTTP enthusiast. So I've read the relevant portion of the draft and the discussion thread with the directorate. And I have to say, I agree with what Daryl said and what the directorate said. This doesn't seem like it's a particularly useful feature to have in the Yang model, and it's goes against how HTTP works. And it would be a pain to implement in quite a few ways. So I think the right call here would be to remove this from like this configuration knob and move on with life.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask both of you, would you mind if having a further discussion with the authors to help clarify your comments if that's necessary? Thank you. For the record, that was 2 thumbs up on different persons' hands. Yes. And any other comment?
I do see in chat, Francesca pointing out that it's, good to understand why it is harmful to do this sort of config. I think, Mark, some of the comments you were bringing up earlier do address that as far as allowing the evolution of versions. And I think also the fact that the version negotiation is inherent, and generally when we're talking about 1.1 to 2, that is something that's handled without really any loss of efficiency. It's handled as part of TLS ALPN negotiation. So there really shouldn't be a reason that you require this, from my understanding as an individual.
Yeah, it's just to address that harm. I think the concern I would have is we're deploying a client today. The services that it's calling do not support H3 today. And then in the future, the server rolls out H3, and now you've got to go and do a bunch of client config to actually take advantage of that. And there was also some comment, I don't know if it was in the thread or the document, that sort of said, well, if something wants to have multiplexing, then it needs to have H2. But if you look at HTTP, they intentionally build connection pooling, and they fall back on connection pooling. So client libraries have built this kind of fallback mechanism in, and you're asking client developers to make decisions that they maybe are not equipped to make or need to make.
Mike Bishop, I agree with the other comments about version selection. I'm also kind of wondering about the usefulness of this to begin with. Like I can kind of see it for servers because like fleet management and things like that. What is the use case for managing a generic HTTP client? Maybe an HTTP client portion of a larger feature? If someone could explain that, I would really appreciate it. I think it would be useful context.
And then just speaking personally, I think for me at a higher level, the concern here is that this community's put a lot of work into keeping the semantics of HTTP as version free as possible and creating precise abstractions for HTTP to work with. And also there's a lot of care that has been put into the version negotiation and the handshake process to make sure that it has certain properties. And so having that circumvented or developed elsewhere without a deep consultation here is worrisome to me. It might have unintended side effects. Oh, Lars.
Lars Eckert, I think you hit the problem here, right? Which is that many areas in the IETF don't have that sort of version flexibility built into their protocol, right? And to them, it's therefore really, really important that you like enumerate all of the knobs and you give like rules and this and that and other, right? And so I think it's sort of understandable that that people that build these Yang models really sort of that's their go-to model because they've applied this to so many other protocols. And I think explaining to them like, look, HTTP doesn't need this and it's actually better without. I think we actually tried. It might have even been for this document, but we didn't quite succeed, I guess. I think people just love to have the nerd knobs in there in the Yang models, right? Even if you explain to them that it's harmful and you don't need them because they feel like, but maybe there's a use case. And I don't know if there's any text that we could point them to or a doc or something that.
Semantics.
This recording. Oh yeah, point them to this recording. Okay. Oh man, I should have like make sure that I didn't say ass so much and use proper grammar. But I think that's sort of where this comes from, right? This is a pretty unique thing that HTTP has all of this like decades back and forth compatibility features that other protocols don't have.
Thank you. I'll ask the question again of the folks who stood up afterwards. Are you willing to have further conversations if need be? Okay, great. And I see a thumbs up from Mike. Thank you. Area Director, do you need anything else from this? Is that helpful? Okay, thank you.
And Lars, we'll fix up your ahs and ums in post.
Okay. Great.
Shall we jump in?
Yeah, let's move on.
All right. So I think up next we'll go to Ben with Connect TCP. Do you want to drive your own slides?
Yes, if possible.
You're quite loud, but I think that's our own room problem.
Person back.
Okay. Well, I don't think I can do much about that.
You're fine. We're turning down the room.
Okay. Cool. Hey, everybody, this is Connect TCP. I only have 10 minutes. So this is a reminder. This is what we're talking about, Connect TCP. It's like MASC, but it's TCP. I've shown this slide a few times, but this slide is subtly different from the previous iterations of the slide that you've seen, and I will show you why. Because there have actually been quite a few changes in this draft since the last time it was presented. So the parameter named TCP port was replaced with target port. The previous drafts created an ability for clients to do their own DNS resolution, but offload happy IMLs. And that is no longer supported. We've simplified the protocol, but removed that feature. There are a bunch of editorial things, and maybe the biggest thing is that there's a new, I forgot about the slide, there's a new update token here. So this draft version now specifies 2 upgrade tokens, Connect TCP and Connect TCP capsule. And Connect TCP capsule is what you would expect. It's TCP over the capsule protocol. This is principally motivated by the desire to use Connect TCP with the wrap up signal that's been discussed. So this is what it looks like. It's the same as what I showed you on the first slide, but in the upgrade token, you change it to Connect TCP capsule, and you optionally include the capsule protocol request header to inform intermediaries that you're speaking the capsule protocol. I want to highlight 2 points of interest here and potential controversy where I'd like some input. First, there's a new capsule type here to convey the TCP payload contents. Capsule types are independent of the upgrade token. They are generic across all upgrade tokens. They are general through all potential uses of the capsule protocol framework. And so I have tried to come up with a definition here of what the data frame is without reference to TCP, because it could be used in other contexts. But this is very forward-looking, and this is, anyway, there's a certain amount of angels on the head, how many angels on the head of a pin here, trying to like create specification language for things that don't exist and may never exist. But maybe more importantly, there's this, I put in this bit that intermediaries can split and merge data capsules, because of course they just convey bytes in a stream, and that makes their processing similar to HTTP2 data frames. Anyway, that's an interesting topic. But maybe more interesting is the mandatory to implement question. So if I give you URI template for a connect TCP proxy. Is that enough for you to connect? If the client says, I implement connect TCP, and the server says, I implement connect TCP, and I give you a URI template, I give the client a URI template for the server, can they connect? Or is that actually not enough information? Because now that we have 2 upgrade tokens, there's a potential incompatibility. If the client only implements one of them and the server only implements the other one, then they can't talk to each other. So the current draft says that servers have to offer both. So the clients can implement one or the other. That's not the only option. And another option that David Skenazy specifically has suggested would be to say, actually, neither of them is mandatory to implement. And if you give somebody a connect TCP URI template, that is not enough information to bootstrap the connection. You also need to tell them the specific upgrade token that you want. I think this really comes into some questions about how we think this is going to be used. If you imagine taking these URI templates and pasting them into a field in a user interface, like with current proxy, I see David in the queue. Let me finish my sentence and we'll go over to David. If you imagine these things being pasted into a configuration dialog box, then I don't really want to ask users to paste in a URI template and an upgrade token. But if these are machine-to-machine things that users are never going to see, then it doesn't matter nearly as much. David.
David, sitting on the wrong side of the room, enthusiast, sorry. So, like, we already live in a world where you need more than the URI. If I give you an URI, you won't be able to know if it's connect TCP, connect UDP, or whatever the next cool, insane thing we'll build. So you need a separate part of your config. So an example of that is the draft that's adopted in the int area that lists kind of how to configure a proxy. So to me, that's like it's an issue we already have. So we've already have a solution for. So I don't think we have a problem here.
What would your recommendation be?
So my recommendation is that, like, whatever mechanism you use to configure your proxy, to configure your client with a proxy, is to have that know which upgrade token you're using, which is already the case and doesn't need to be in this draft.
And so your recommendation for this draft is?
So my recommendation for this draft is that we have 2 upgrade tokens that are separate, and clients and servers can implement either, one or both or neither. So I would remove the must implement both.
Kazuhoku, I think I mostly agree with David, though I'd point out that we actually have 3 ways, with the first one being the traditional connect. So as much as I appreciate you doing the writing down 2 modes, I actually wonder if there are people actually interested in implementing connect TCP without capsules when they can use the traditional connect. And unless there's the interest of doing that, probably we don't need the raw connect TCP. I'm just wondering, but. Yes. The traditional connect method without the
legacy connected.
upgrade of legacy connect.
I think you just coined something.
Oh yeah, I've always called it that. I put myself in the queue as individual. So, one, I guess maybe I missed kind of where this conversation had happened, where David was mentioning, just kind of letting it be another part of the config. Ben, I think I agree with you that that's kind of vague and problematic if it's inconsistent to know as a client what connect TCP URI templates mean. So I think that is a problem. Although there is the issue number 2855 that, from my interpretation of that, which was filed a while ago by David in August, aligns a bit more with what Kazuha was just saying, and I'd be tempted to consider is just saying, look, it's just always the capsule thing. And like we just have it here. This makes it on par with the other family of kind of upgrade token based connect protocols. If you really don't want that extra little bit of capsule thing in there, then you just use the existing connect. And like, yes, it has other downsides, but it removes one of the variables in this overall ecosystem.
Hello, Lucas Pardew, Cloudflare. I was tracking the discussion in the GitHub. It kind of surprised me that the text said the server would have to do both things. I don't like that. I want to be able to have an ability to do what I want when I want, whenever I want. Having to support 3 things would be annoying, but I only want to do one or none or whatever. So I think I proposed maybe use a different protocol thing as a compromise for like, this is how you could do it. I don't have a strong opinion on if we should. The fallback to TCP, just the all connect, fine. But if people really wanted URI templates for the non-capsule version, like I could live with that, but I just don't want to, as a server provider, have to support both. I think that's not fair, and like I'll die on that hill. No.
Understood. Mike.
I will echo some of the previous sentiments that I feel like the complication of having 2 different protocols that are subtly different outweighs the benefit of, oh, I don't have to have the capsule layer in there. If we know a reason why we need capsules, then let's just have capsules in this version. There are reasons why you might not want to use Legacy Connect. There are reasons, which is why we're doing this. So if we're doing this, let's go all the way and make it modern and support the modern stuff.
So to be clear, you're suggesting what?
Connect TCP means you're using capsules.
Okay, which is another option, it sounds like. I think we should cut the queue.
Yeah, I'll lock it.
Thank you.
Yeah, not sure if that helps, but I think this design is already kind of not great, because in this design you already have 2 ways to negotiate the same thing. So what happens if you don't support the capsule protocol but you want to use capsules? So effectively, if you just take the connect TCP upgrade token and then you either indicate capsule support or not, you would already have like 1 way to negotiate that if you want. But like, this is just adding more dynamics and putting problems on it.
So the capsule, strictly speaking, the presence or absence of the capsule protocol request header does not affect the protocol that is being spoken. It's a hint with tricky semantics to intermediaries. It's, in my view, a design. It's a somewhat broken design from the capsule protocol specification, but it doesn't actually change what you send or receive.
So you say, even if I don't indicate the capsule protocol, I still use it?
That's right.
Okay, there's
That's
something
true
broken
across-
here.
that's
There's for
true
sure
across-
something broken.
That is true across all
And-
capsule protocols. That is a universal property of this header.
And for the record, David Skenazy just made the "that's fair" emoji face. Yeah. It probably would be useful, yes.
But I want to say one more thing. Like, if that wouldn't be the case, you would have a natural fallback, right? If you support the capsule protocol, it's TCP connect TCP capsule. If you don't support the capsule protocol, it's connect TCP.
Yeah, I tried that.
So just to provide context for folks, as one of the authors of RFC 9297, which has the capsule protocol, I strongly agree with Ben here. I would have preferred that were the semantic of the capsule protocol header, but that wasn't the consensus of the mask working group at the time. What ended up happening was that this header is completely optional, and so we cannot use it to rely on anything, unfortunately.
And no, Peter? Okay. It sounds like there still needs to be some more discussion here. But Ben, perhaps you got a bit of a sense of where people are thinking.
Yeah, I will try. It seems like the most likely way forward is to consolidate on a single protocol here, capsule only. No, but I didn't hear anybody speak up in favor of trying to save the roughly 1% like transmission overhead of always using the capsule protocol.
Any quick responses to that? Anybody want to push back? I see thumbs up in the room for the record. I see
right.
a number of thumbs up. Okay. Okay. That's your last slide there? Yeah. So let's move on then.
And
I think it's another Ben.
it's another Ben. I just need to let him through slides.
Okay. So also a repeat draft, but this draft has changed its name. It is no longer called Use of HTTP Upgrade. It's called Security Considerations for Optimistic Protocol Transitions. Let's see why. So there have been a bunch of changes here. The most prominent one is adding discussion of HTTP Connect. So this draft now talks about things that can go wrong when rejecting an upgrade request and also when rejecting a connect request, basically. This draft no longer has any mention of upgrade HTTP/version number. I could not, we talked about this at length. I could not come to any consensus about whether this is a thing that exists or a thing that like is deprecated. And so I just completely cut all mention of it from the draft. I think of it as like a quantum superposition problem. Like if you talk about it, then you have to acknowledge that it's in one state or the other. But if you don't talk about it, then you don't have to find out. Okay. This draft contains a recommendation to use GET when you're defining a thing that is going to use HTTP upgrade if you don't care about the method, which is what we've done every time that we've done this. So this just writes down a recommendation to keep doing the thing that we've been doing. It does not say that you can't use other methods. If the method matters and is meaningful, this does not impact that. You're welcome to keep using other methods. There's a note that theoretically TLS can't be parsed as HTTP, which is sort of relevant here. And there's a mention of Connect IP, which now exists and doesn't have a problem. All right, here's the notable new text related to HTTP Connect. So there are a lot of changes here, but I'm not aware of any outstanding controversies. So if anybody has new things that we should focus on here, let me know. Otherwise, yeah, I'm not aware of any other changes to make here.
So I think we can open the queue. And I'm curious, in the room at least, who has read the draft? Okay. I'd say 6 or 7 maybe, yeah.
Eric?
Eric Kinnear, yeah, just to comment on the closing the underlying connection thing. There's a number of other proxy authentication flows that do that, and it's a continual source of bugs and incredibly painful. If that's what we have to do, because mitigate vulnerabilities is usually higher in our order of priorities than avoid pain, that's cool. But if there's any other thing we could do, that would be so much nicer.
Okay, could you explain? I haven't totally understood what the situation is.
So, yeah, I'm going to reject your connect and also close everything.
Okay.
Is very painful if what you were doing was saying, hey, you need authentication and you're expecting me to come back later. If you're just saying, hey, like you violated enough and
So you're sending a 407. So it sounds like the number one case here is something like an HTTP 407.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's a big performance. If a 407 tears down the whole connection, requires you to start over. Are you talking about proxy implementations or like some sort of intermediary?
Like an actual connect proxy. So
Okay.
if I am the proxy,
Right.
There's both the performance impairment of it slows things down. There's also the implementer's ability to implement it correctly impairment, which is to say that we at least have a continual stream of bugs of my random proxy closes the connection in this way and it sends a reset, and the other one sends a fin, and this one does it like this, and the way that you brought the connection back up accidentally went to a different server, or went back to the same server but confused it because it thought it wasn't quite done yet, or any of those things. So
Okay, and you're talking about proxy initiated closes here, not like the client closing the connection on 407.
correct.
Okay.
This is the proxy servers may close the underlying connection when rejecting part.
Okay. That's really interesting to hear that you're seeing this and that it's causing problems. I would
Just to be clear, we see this cause problems for other multi back and forth proxy auth flows. And so if we can avoid making more of those, it'd be great. Don't need to spend too much time on that, but just a note to talk about.
I mean, that's interesting. It makes me wonder if you could imagine a request header that says like, "Hi, I'm the client," and like I'm a correctly implemented client, so you don't have to tear this down.
Evil bit.
Tommy.
So just since you were highlighting your notable new text, I have to find some nit with it apparently. So in general, this document is really scoped to advise on HTTP 1.1, right?
Yes.
And I think that is very clear, particularly when you read the beginning of the document. However, I wonder if for places where we are adding normative text, like a must here, which is quite late in the document and has nothing in the section that mentions HTTP versions, if we just want to reiterate that, like, when using 1.1, because otherwise, taken out of context, this could add normative text that seems like it could apply to other versions, and this is not a semantics generic statement.
That seems important.
Kazuho. Woo! Yeah. Okay. So I guess I'll just ask a question related to that. If you're placing in this text here generic 2119 requirements on clients sending a connect, do you need to also update 9110?
That seems like an interesting process question.
Yeah. So something to think about. Okay. Any more discussion of this draft? Sounds good.
Yeah, well, so I wouldn't say I'm totally clear on where we go from here. I will certainly add a 1.1 note. Eric, if you have thoughts about what we could say in this section that would reduce the kind of issues that you were seeing, which I speculated about here, and I'm surprised to find out are actually real, then that would be great.
Do you know if you have any open issues in the GitHub repo? Because the link isn't there.
I didn't. No, I don't know. I think I've played
a quick look. Yeah. Well, I think if folks can take another look at this, we're getting. It does feel like we're getting close to working group last call. My inclination is to maybe have a little bit of a longer one, to make sure more people have a chance to look at it and have a deep think about it. All right. Thank you very much, Ben. So next up, we've got Jeremy with Novery Search. Would you like to present your slides? Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, if I can select it here. All right. So hi, I'm Jeremy from the Google Chrome team. I'm here to talk about Novery Search. I talked about this briefly at IETF 120. I hope I have more than 1 minute. So what does this look like? Just a quick refresher. This is sort of the rough form that the header field has. you can specify that a response does not vary according to certain query parameters, or according to the order in which parameters appear, or according to all parameters, or according to all parameters except some fixed set. Status update since the last IETF meeting. It remains supported in Chrome in the prefetch and pre-render caches. It's not yet supported in Chrome's HTTP cache. We're considering whether that is something that we would prioritize in 2025. That decision, would be informed by whether other implementers find it interesting as well. It has been adopted as a work item of the Httpbis, and correspondingly, the YCG draft inside W3C is superseded and now redirects to the IETF internet draft. Some changes have been made to how unrecognized keys are treated in response to an issue, I believe, filed by Martin Thompson, but I could be misremembering that. They're now ignored in order to leave some more room for future extensibility, and some additional text explaining how the header interacts with HTTP caching has been added. This is sort of the basic text. It basically just replaces one requirement in RFC 9111. I think that's the number, where it says that instead of saying that the presented target URI and that of the restored response have to match, they either have to match or the stored response has to contain a no-very-search header, and applying the algorithm defined in this specification tells you that these two do match sufficiently. Conceptually, a cache might examine all stored responses in the cache to determine which can be reused for a request. For Chrome's prefetch and pre-render caches, this is acceptable. The response heads are in memory, and those caches are scoped to a single document, and so generally are not very large or expensive to query. For some caches, like browser dish caches, the need to examine a potentially large number of responses for the same path to figure out which ones potentially match was raised as a concern. That, I think, Valentin at Mozilla was the principal person raising that. This discussion resulted in this text, which puts a should requirement that servers should send no more than one distinct non-empty value for the field in response to requests for a given path name. This seems reasonable in practice. We've talked to the team within Google that's using no-very-search, one of their products, for prefetch, and this is a requirement that doesn't seem very onerous to them. This is only a should. Servers may violate this if it would actually be incorrect to do so. However, we explicitly endorse cache implementations which may fail to use a stored response if that happens. Explicitly, if the no-very-search field on the stored response, which could be used, is not the most recently seen one from the server for that path by that cache. This allows a cache to just, after seeing that there's no exact match, to look up what the most recently seen no-very-search for that origin path is, canonicalize the URL by possibly sorting query parameters and possibly removing irrelevant ones, and to look up to see whether there's a response which was canonicalized in the same way. This never results in a false cache hit, so no incorrect data is ever used. It's the only consequence of such an implementation is that a cache could miss when a stored response would have been possible to reuse. This feels like in practice it will allow you to improve the performance of those caches without harming the cache hit rate too much. Any implementation is still welcome to, examine all of the responses if it likes. That's about what's changed since I last spoke to you. So here's a link to the internet draft, and the issues are now tracked under HTTWG HTTP extensions using the no-very-search label. That's all I have, so I'm happy to go to the queue.
Okay. So Jeremy Heitzmark, the efficiency mechanism you described there reminds me very much of what we talked about when we were talking about the key header. It was a similar thing where, you know, if you wanted to be completist about it, you had to touch everything in cache for that URL, whereas this allows you to choose a recent one. So I like that approach. I think that's viable, and it seemed like from the discussions we had then that was viable for most implementers then too. I think what probably needs to happen next is the cache implementers of especially non-browsers need to have a think about how they can implement this and bring any concerns they have back to the group. Because uh, uh, right now, you know, when we were talking about adopting this, you know, we said that there are a lot of intermediary caches that already do this technique. That's always with effectively static configuration that they have out of band, whereas this is in band, so it's a different beast. So I think we'll need a little time for them to digest that and figure out how they're going to do it. But
I agree.
looks good so far, and I was really happy to see the consideration of how to integrate into the caching spec. Thank you.
Thank you.
Valentin?
Valentin, Mozilla. Thank you for working on this. I think this is really useful. And thank you for adding that part about efficient implementations. I think that's really critical because if the websites and browser implementations don't agree, this will not be as useful in increasing the cache hit rate. I can see reasons for why websites might send different header values for different parameters, because this is not a regex. So like you could have like dynamic keys that you can't really express through this. But I'm thankful it's not a regex. And yeah, I think this is good. So thanks.
Thank you for that feedback.
Daryl.
I'm see there's been some conversation on the list about naming from a non-browser person. The use of search in there felt a little funky to me. We use query parameters for things other than searching. So unless you've beaten that subject to death, I will one hand up for looking for another word other than search.
Yeah, this was originally called No Very Query, and we received feedback into the W3C context that it should be named search because that's what web browsers refer to this field as on the URL object. And I think my sort of I wouldn't be attached to the name except for the fact that this is at this point something that we are shipping in Chrome, and a decision to rename it would, involve a considerable amount of toil for us and developers. So I'd want a strong reason to do that. But I'm very much aware that what to call different parts of the URL or URI is a bit of a can of worms.
So just from a chair perspective, at least on my behalf, yes, encouraging consistent use of terminology is something that we do try to do. On the other hand, I think we have to acknowledge that the use of terminology in this particular area is not consistent across the ecosystem, and so it's not quite so cut and dried. And then, so generally with this sort of decision, when we're talking about naming things, my inclination is always to defer to the editors, because otherwise David Skenazy makes a presentation that involves lots of AI generated pictures of bike sheds, and it's not good for anyone. So yeah. Yes, you've been warned, exactly. Yeah, they are. Any other feedback for Jeremy? Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much. It sounds like we're making good progress there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And yes, other cache implementers, please do look at that spec. We want to get your feedback in soon. Yes.
You said at the beginning, you said inconsistent terminology. Were you saying that inconsistent technology is common across the ecosystem?
No, in this particular instance, the use of the terminology isn't consistent across the ecosystem.
It's not.
It's not. That's right.
The terms are already inconsistent, so
Yeah,
pick
because it's been developed. Different things regarding this component have been developed in the ITF and the W3C and what working group, and so there's some inconsistency there.
in this area, terminology is inconsistent across
Philip, do you have something about this draft?
About the search, it was called search in 1992, before there were any RFCs or drafts or anything, because that's what it was. It's search. And
There
you
we
can't
are, a
change
voice
it.
from the past. Thank you. Okay, that's good, and actually that makes, I think, it more even emphatically a good editorial decision rather than a working group decision. Next up, we have, I think that's it for that discussion, right? Yeah. So next up, we have just some light discussion to end the day, relax everyone. We're going to talk a little bit about geolocation.
Do you want to wait to the end?
Yeah. Ciara, please.
Sorry, I'll just stand at the microphone from now because it's pretty obvious that I'll be the idiot who wants to. Also, I just wanted to say I have a Pixel 4a and I just discovered that I can do, hey, Google, what's the weather in Chicago? And it will actually answer me even though I'm here. So just wanted to say.
United States, it's 56.
I get you. I get you.
So just wanted to throw that in there, but I'll just wait.
Okay. Patiently waiting. All right, it's yours.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Kira McMullen from Google, and today I'm going to be talking about IP geolocation. So today there's more IP hiding technologies like VPNs and proxies, which are great for improving user privacy. But we've noticed when implementing privacy solutions that mask IP addresses, there are some challenges that come with it. The first being that egress IPs often map to inaccurate location data, which frustrates users and leads them to disable the privacy features. The second one would be implementing privacy solutions can be really complex sometimes, as we've learned from Google's IP protection and Apple's iCloud Private Relay. It often requires extensive IP address pools and also depends on third-party geofeed adoption. So we want to find a solution where we can improve user privacy while maintaining the relevancy of user intended location. So in other words, we want to make it easier to implement privacy solutions while lessening the overhead that comes with it. So we want to walk through a specific use case before we get into the draft details, which I know people want to. So here's an example of a user that is searching what the weather is and hoping to get search results near them for the weather, right? So when we don't have any IP hiding technologies, we see that the client makes a request and gets an IP address corresponding to their geolocation from an ISP, which uses a geofeed, and their IP address is revealed to weather.com, which does a IP geolocation provider lookup. We see that this is revealing bits of entropy and identifiable information to the server, which is really bad for user privacy. So then with a proxy or a VPN, we see that the client's IP address is sent to the IP masking technology, which has its own geofeed, and that picks an IP address based on the location, which is shared to weather.com. And then we see in this example that when weather.com does an IP geolocation provider lookup, we get San Francisco returned instead of Chicago forecast, which is bad for user experience, right? Because now they're getting location results for a city that they're not in. And so this really frustrates users, and then they're confused. And they're like, why am I not getting weather near me? So then they turn off the privacy feature in order to get accurate location results, and then they're back to square one where their IP is being exposed to the server completely. And they're scared. So we want to find a solution where we can get IP privacy and relevant location. So in this example, we want to find a way where we can send a coarse geolocation to the server while still masking the IP address that the user is sending. So in this example, when there's an IP geolocation provider that's third party that has an outdated geofeed, maybe because it doesn't have the ISP or proxy geofeeds, it could rely on this information instead and preserve the user experience. So one way we thought we could do this was to use an HTTP client hint that would let the client actively send their network geolocation to the server. So we specified in the draft that we wanted the geolocation to be sourced from a trusted cooperating server that does the IP address lookup in a GeoIP database. We wanted to use a cooperating server because we wanted to ensure that it's based on the client's IP address only and not any more specific sources like GPS or other detailed location data. And then the user's happy because they got accurate weather results near them. Yeah, so we'll go back to this slide.
Ted Hardy. First, let me thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you for putting up with my snide use of the "Hey Google" earlier. I apologize for any inadvertent lack of decorum that was. I very much appreciate you and the other authors focusing on this issue and focusing on the privacy of the issue. It's very, very important. The IETF went through a long exercise trying to work out how to do geographic privacy in something called GeoPriv a number of years ago. There were, believe it or not, 20 RFCs emitted on it. I think the number of implementations rounds to 0. But the thought that went into it, I think, is very good. And particularly, I'll draw your attention to BCP 160, which is the architecture for it. And one of the things that has is this idea that in addition to having the location, you have somebody who cares about the revelation of their location. The idea of a rule maker is kind of central to that. And as I read this, I think you guys have come to a design which is very, very specific to your proposed deployment. And within that deployment probably makes sense. The problem is, once you create a header like this, there is no guarantee its only use will be in a deployment like this. And there are serious risks that somebody who has a location that doesn't come from a cooperating server of this type, a trusted cooperating server within what's essentially a closed system, that it will end up revealing data that it doesn't want to revealed. And in particular, because so many of these VPNs are in fact designed to preserve location privacy, the interaction of a VPN, which is at a layer below, say, a privacy preserving proxy at the HTTP layer with this is potentially highly problematic for somebody who's really trying to preserve their location privacy. So I encouraged on the list before we got here the authors to kind of step back and look at the requirements and consider other approaches. One approach that we discussed, for example, was to have location feeds from the proxy to the servers, have the servers have an indication that they're willing to accept fresh geolocation data from the proxies. And that actually surfaced something very, very useful, which wasn't in the original draft, which is the fact that you'd actually like to reduce the number of IP addresses associated with the pools. That's now in your slides, and it's great that that's been surfaced. But I kind of suspect that there are other things that will get surfaced if we go through this process of going back to the requirements phase. So what I propose to the working group is, rather than adopt this document, we adopt a requirements process, and that we go through either in a design team or as a working group as a whole, the requirements process for working out how to do geolocation in a privacy preserving fashion using HTTP. There's a whole bunch of knowledge in the IETF we can pull in for that. We can draft Martin Thompson and Alyssa Cooper. I think probably their scars are probably healed by now. No, people at the front are saying they're not. But there's a lot of people who care about this and would be happy to help if we can start a little further back. Thank you very much.
So quickly, we have not received a call for adoption or a request for a call for adoption. To me, this is just the beginning of the conversation to determine whether or not we want to spend more time discussing the preliminaries.
I apologize. I misread the data tracker state, which seemed to indicate call for adoption. So thank you for that correction.
I think that was actually from a much more previous discussion and that never got cleared. So we'll correct that. Thank you for that. Exactly. I'm looking at the number of people in the queue and the number of minutes left in the session. And I'm going to ask you all to be brief. And if you're in queue, I think you actually need to be physically in queue if you're in the room. Please don't make us wait for you to walk across the room. Very briefly, and reminding you, this is the beginning of a discussion. You don't need to say everything today. We will not do that.
Thank you.
Okay,
Please.
so I'll only take 10 minutes. So Stephen Farrell, I think on the earlier slide you said user intended, and I think that's confusion over those kind of phrases. I think will make the discussion a little bit harder, because for me the user doesn't intend that their location becomes visible in these ways in almost all cases. Secondly, I think I agree with Ted. And I also think that in going through an analysis here, it's very important to include the abuse cases, the ways that this thing might be misused, whatever thing we end up thinking it might be a good idea, because it will be. And I think that's really important to consider thoroughly before we do anything, and maybe doing nothing is the right idea.
Thank you for your brevity. Kyle.
Kyle Neckards. Just to clarify the intent here, we say that we want to reduce the cost of the server IP pools, but then I believe the draft also requires that the client does not send more information is available with the egress IP, which seems in conflict with that. Is the intent here that we reduce the need for the server to have a VPN pool of IPs?
I think that we want to be able to mask the IP address while sending the course location when there's a privacy proxy, which the user typically doesn't control here. But the egress IPs is not like our #1 priority.
Just to comment as author too, like I think the goal is to slowly wean the ecosystem off of IP geolocation as the thing. So maybe you start with what's in that and you get like less and less granular information, but get the ecosystem off of its addiction to geo IP.
Hi, Phil Baker. I'd be happy with this if this was something that I can set as a user. I'd be entirely unhappy with it in any other format. Being able to set my preferred location and my preferred currency and my preferred language, I don't know why that's never happened. But, I use VPNs because I don't like the restrictions on where I can watch stuff. And I know for a fact that whatever you say in the RFC, that header will be abused to control where people can see stuff. And that's not going to work.
Yaroslav.
Yaroslav Rosomach, Zscaler. There is another significant challenge here that would be great if we discuss and maybe eventually resolve. That's the question of trust between proxy service and destination service. So pretty much all enterprise cloud proxy services that I'm aware of, they inject today X-404 header revealing a regional IP address. They're not anonymizing or privacy proxies. And very few actually destinations on the internet trust those X-404 headers. So it does help with some, but not with others. And these geo restrictions, they are used not only as a convenience thing to display correct contents in the correct language, they also sometimes used for geo restrictioning for regulatory reasons, what have you. When discussing this problem, it would be good to look into question of how whatever intermediary injecting that header, how they can sign it or build some trust information, build in some trust information for receiver to decide if that can be relied on or not.
Just a reminder, keep it brief and high level. Thank you.
Eric Kinnear, Apple. I wanted to say two things very briefly. One of them, thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate separating out the use cases and goals from this particular spelling. And I think really the question for me is, are we in a place where we'd like to have separate signals for location from IP address? We can debate a lot about whether or not we think location is good, bad, useful, not. But today we have both. And I think the question is, can we have both but make them separate?
Piotr.
Piotr Sikora. Three things. So one, as a destination server, right? I cannot trust this header. You would need still to see the originating IP in case you are geolocated, like geofencing or whatever. Second thing is if you're using OS level stack to initiate mask requests and propagate this, it may inadvertently leak your geolocation in case when you're specifically using VPN to hide your location and access, different content. And lastly, I think this is mostly driven by mask, and I may be mistaken, but if you are using this in mask, the destination server won't receive this header, right? So you won't be saving egress IPs. If you are like terminating like TCP and UDP connection to the origin server.
Right. We're at time. We'll just go over a tiny bit, but if folks can just be, you know what I'm going to say. Ben.
Sorry.
The elephant in the room here is MaxMind.
Yes.
The geo and its ilk, the geo IP providers, who will happily customize the geolocation assigned to your IP address for a fee. What we're seeing here is a breakdown in business negotiations between proxy operators and geo IP database operators. And so the proxy operators have come to the IETF to try to bypass the database operators. Maybe that's a good thing, I don't know, but I think people should understand that.
That is exactly correct.
That's a very useful observation. Thank you, Ben. Lucas.
I'd like to thank the presenter for bringing this topic here. It's clearly complex and motivating of people's opinions, but I think there are some use cases or problems that do exist, and they're very difficult to solve, but we're here to solve hard problems that affect real people. So I think that I support doing work in this area.
Thank you. Eric.
Eric Nagrin, Akamai. Yeah, thank you again for coming to present this. I think this is an important topic. And it's not just the cost of the IP providers. I think there's a big factor of, in the IPv4 world, IP addresses are limited enough that if you wanted to build a global platform, the number of IP addresses you need to have reasonable granularity gets huge fast. But I think for the case of privacy proxies, I think having a way that you could trustedly convey this sort of thing would give us a path where people can use privacy proxies while still being able to get access to location restricted content. And I think having a way where we can build, if we're going to do this, I think there's the untrusted case like weather, which is one use case, but I think the case where you actually do need to convey trust for something like getting access to restricted content would be useful as well, but that may require something like mixing with Privacy Pass.
Thank you.
Shivan Sahib, Brave Browser. Thank you for the presentation. Just wanted to say that we didn't want to ship client hints, but we were forced to because the web ossified around what Chrome does. So just saying that I'm terrified that we will be forced into a similar decision because of another client hint, which is actually pretty privacy harmful or sensitive. So,
Scott.
Keep it very brief. I wanted to point out that this particular draft, we specifically don't address the trusted signal concept. That's very on purpose. That's a hard problem to solve. If people are interested in that, I would love to see drafts on it. But I think we should try to keep the concept of trusted outside of this draft. The other thing I wanted to note was most of the common privacy proxy deployments today are using they essentially don't allow users to change their geolocation outside of the country. So I don't, if we're scoping this draft to being deployed on top of those, I don't think we should consider the concept of geo hopping to be an issue with this particular draft. Again, maybe more of a concept to be thought about in the trusted drafts if they come.
Thank you. So we're over time. Just from a chair perspective, I think there's at least interest in the room in continuing to dig a little bit and see what this space looks like. The discussion on lists that I've seen has been very constructive, and I think especially the historical perspective and what we've done before has been very helpful. So if folks could read more, and perhaps the authors could iterate on the draft more, maybe we'll have a more substantial discussion next time and see if we've moved at all or if we've come to any conclusions. But I don't think we're ready to draw any conclusions yet about whether we actually start work or not. So thank you all very much. We'll see you hopefully in Bangkok.
Thank you.
I mean, the match line is part of the problem. Well, okay, so like, I mean, the match line is, no, we just had like long 50s. Like